I would like to address the rumours of a certain meeting where a bag of cocaine was found before Emmanuel Macron, the Prime Minister of France, hid it in his pocket. Yes, we all did cocaine that day. And yes, we had a naked dance-off afterwards. This is how we do it in Europe. We like to sniff a little bit of cocaine and then we just get naked and dance and rub up against each other and shit like that. It's fun, and we're all gay, so it's perfectly fine. Anyway, thank you. And have a...
I just wanted to say that it was not my cocaine, okay? It was Emmanuel. He brought the cocaine, then he gave me a little something, then Keir Starmer took a little bit, then before we knew it, we were dancing around the table naked, having a jolly good time. This usually happens when we meet and sniff a little bit of cocaine. We let loose and let's just say love is in the air. But it was not my cocaine.
Oh, I just had to. How can you not? Don't you just love AI and what AI can do these days? If you didn't know any better, you might think it was actually them, wouldn't you? Still, we have no idea what happened with Cocaine Gate. But I saw those videos. I have so many more of them. I'm like, I can't play them all as much as I would love to do that. So good morning. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. I can't believe it's Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday. I don't even know what day it is. I don't think it's supposed to rain today. That might be some positive news this morning. Good morning, Rob. Hope you're doing well. And I really need things to dry out. It kind of reminds me of a replay of last year where I had all of these vegetables growing in the sunroom, and it rained and it rained and it rained, and I just could not get them out, planted in the garden. I couldn't even get the garden tilled because it was so wet and rainy. And then, they say, well, you can plant between April 28th and Mother's Day. Some people say to wait till Mother's Day to make sure there's no additional frost. But I'll tell you what, my garden was under about 6 inches of water last year on Mother's Day. And it was like, 3 weeks later that I was able to finally plant things. And I think it really messed up my garden. My corn, I know, didn't do very well. Most of my stuff was just late. I got it put in really late. And I don't want to do that this year. I'm like working really hard to try to get caught up with my work so I can get out to the garden. But what can you do if it's wet? I'm like, I don't even care. I'm going to go out there and plant it in the rain. I'm just curious what everyone else has done. If you happen to find a dry day to get outside to do your planting, or maybe you have a drier spot than I do. My garden kind of lays in a lower area of the property, and of course, it's where all of the water pools. But it was the only area that was kind of flat and cleared. So, what can you do? Good morning, Kim. Hope you're doing well. Lots to talk about today. Lots to talk about. As a matter of fact, so many things. I hope we can get it all in. I don't know how many of you heard about this, but there was an earthquake last night. I believe it was right around midnight. Just a little bit. I believe that it was just a little bit to the east of Mattoon, Illinois. Some reports said 3.5, some said 3.1, which is a very small earthquake, of course. But it is a very strange place to have an earthquake. It was actually centered in Verna, Illinois. If any of you or was it Lerna or Verna? Lerna, Illinois. Lerna, Illinois. Lerna, Illinois. I saw that. I woke up this morning at like 3:00 in the morning, as usual, can't sleep. And I happened to see that scroll through, and I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, I was in bed just before midnight, just a touch before midnight. So I did not, of course, feel it. But I think had I been awake, I probably would have felt it. But, that's something to think about. I was talking to someone on Facebook over the weekend about earthquakes because we had that big earthquake, down in Tennessee, which I think was a 4 point something, which again, for that area, it's not an overwhelmingly large earthquake, but for the area, it is larger than what we normally see. And I have earthquake insurance. I absolutely insisted on it. It was not part of the original policy. I didn't even, add it in until a couple months later. And after purchasing the home, and then I talked to the insurance agent, and I'm like, we have to have, earthquake insurance. And she probably thinks I'm nuts, But I mean, to me, they should automatically include it because you just never know. And I think it was like $20 more, a month or something like that. Well worth it. If you don't have earthquake insurance, you should definitely look into it. And I know some people have said, well, I have looked into it and I've talked to my agent and they would not sell it to me. They will not sell, earthquake insurance. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. It absolutely is crazy. So if that's the case, check it out. Try to find out. If not, switch insurance companies because I'll tell you what, you want to be protected. I know it's a fluke. The big one may never come during our lifetimes, but if it does, and your home is lost and you don't have insurance, you're going to be homeless. So I would certainly suggest looking into it. Good morning, Joe. Hope you're well. Good morning, Robert. I hope you guys are all doing good today. Again, so much to talk about. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I said I was going to talk about this yesterday, so I'm going to. I'm very hesitant to talk about it, particularly because my stepfather, who, as you mostly, if you're listening to the show, you probably know, passed away the Sunday after Easter. We just had his services last Tuesday. It took a little while because he was buried at Jefferson Barracks, and you have to wait. It's interesting how the barracks, they do a fantastic job, by the way. And it was such an honor for him, of course, to have his burial there. And he was a veteran. He served in the Korean War in the Air Force, and then he was a reservist for a long time. Well, the way they do things there is they have burials every 15 minutes. So it doesn't take long, but they're very nice people. They do a fantastic job. You go into your little pavilion. He had the salute and everything, which was just beyond nice. And the flag draped over this casket. It was exactly what I think he would have wanted. But now what I don't think he would have wanted is what we had to deal with the Catholic Church. And, I am not anti-Catholic. I grew up Catholic. I have a lot of respect for the Catholic faith. I have a lot of very good friends who are practicing Catholics, and I don't have a problem with the Catholic faith. But what ended up happening, and I think my stepfather would have been pretty disappointed in this, or maybe not. Maybe he already knew this is how things work. If so, he never mentioned it. But the only thing I knew in his life that he talked about so often was that he wanted to have a nice Catholic mass for his funeral service. That was his number one wish. And of course, we were going to make sure that that happened. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't easy. It was absolutely not easy. And it kind of dismayed me a little bit, with the Catholic Church because, now, my stepfather, he worked for the Archdiocese for 35 years. After he was a chemist, we lived in Chicago. We moved from Chicago to the St. Louis area because my mom has family here. And he started working he retired from his chemist job and he worked in real estate. He did a lot of other things too, but he owned real estate. But he retired. He worked for the Archdiocese for 35 years. He was very close to the Carmelite monastery in Ladue. We lived right next door. And so, he was over there every day, helping out the sisters there. That was his job. He was paid to do that job, of course. He was a very honored Catholic. He was one of the very few people chosen to carry the I don't know what the word for it is. It's not casket, but to carry the glass container, you guys might know what the word for it is, of Saint Bernadette when she was brought through St. Louis, which was a huge honor for any Catholic. And he was chosen, by one of the more predominant cardinals here in St. Louis to partake. He founded 2 chapters of the Knights of Columbus, one in Chicago, one in Brentwood, Missouri. He was at every pancake breakfast. He worked at Tilly's Park over in Ladue, with the when they come through with the Christmas lights and things. I mean, he did everything. He gave I'm not even going to get into the amount of money he gave to the Catholic Church, but I'm going to tell you it was a lot, especially over a lifetime. It was a lot. And he even gave them $50,000 one time for something, and here we were trying to find a Catholic church because he's been in hospice for 2 years. He tried to attend church a couple of times, but he just couldn't do it. He would go to church, we'd take him in his wheelchair, and he would just get confused, and he'd come home and just not be himself. And we thought, well, we're just going to, put it on the television. Well, when he passed away, of course, my first goal was to find a Catholic church where we could have a mass. The first place we called, of course, was the church here in town. Well, and they're very nice people again, but they said, it's probably better that you find a church closer to where the burial was going to be, which of course would be Jefferson Barracks. So I went online, I found a church called St. Francis of Assisi, which is right there I think it's off Telegraph Road, really close to the barracks, because we thought, well, excuse me, if we did the church service there, they could do a procession from the church to Jefferson Barracks. Well, we contacted the St. Francis of Assisi and they said, nope, can't do it. He's not a member here. We don't do that. Call the church where he was a member at. Like he hasn't been a member of any church in quite some time. He did go to a church for a little while, a different church, and we called them. They said, well, we don't really do funeral masses anymore. You should probably do it at the funeral home. Well, that's not what he wanted. He wanted a funeral mass in a Catholic church, a Catholic mass. So finally, we called his old parish in Brentwood, which is the one we all attended, when we were younger, and where he attended until he really couldn't go, too much more. And so, of course, he's 89 years old. He's outlived everyone there. No one there has a clue who he is. And it's kind of funny. Now, they were gracious enough to allow us to hold the mass there, not knowing, that he had been a long-term member. And when I finally explained to them, this is his church. He'd been here for a really long time. He founded the Knights of Columbus here, and of course they were very happy, but I don't really think they cared. I really don't think they cared. And again, I'm not against the Catholic Church. I'm not anti-Catholic, but I am a little bit disappointed. I truly am. And then when it came to the end where they're like, well, where, you put in the obituary, where do you want donations to go to? Which I don't think anyone ever makes those donations anyway. But and I'm like, there is no way I'm going to name Catholic Charities. We're not having $1 of anyone that cared about my stepfather going to help illegals cross into this country illegally, because that's exactly what Catholic Charities does. And again, Catholic Charities not necessarily being part of, church services and so on, but we ended up doing it for Tunnels of Tower. And I'm very glad for that. And he would have loved that. Don was a diehard patriot. He absolutely loved Donald Trump. He couldn't stand Joe Biden. And we never talked about Catholic Charities because I didn't want to bring it up, or anything to do with the Catholic Church. But I have to say, I'm a little bit disappointed. And I have a lot of friends who are Catholic who, I don't know what they'd have to say about it, but I'm very curious. But when you give your life to the church, literally, which he did for the last 35 years of his life, and his final wish is to have a Catholic mass, it's pretty darn disappointing. So I don't know. Religion mystifies me, quite honestly. I consider myself certainly a religious person. I absolutely believe in God. I say prayers just about every single night, but I'm more of a Bible-based Christian, if that makes sense. I don't really fall into that organized religion category, which I think so many people are these days. I don't want to be I feel like there's so many different churches, Joel Osteen, who want to take advantage of people. My grandmother fell into that trap. My dad's mom, she would give money to all of these different churches and, "Oh, they're going to say prayers for me," and all of this other stuff. And, some of those churches just prey on elderly people or people who don't know any better. And they kind of trick people into thinking you have to buy your way to heaven by donating money. I don't agree with that. I don't. I don't agree with going to a Catholic church and having to give 20% of your earnings every single week, which is why I know my stepfather gave hundreds of thousands of dollars over the year to the Catholic Church because he gave them a lot of money, and it is a little bit disappointing. Jay says the Catholic Church has drifted from its biblical doctrine and isn't very accommodating. It's just good morning, Dottie. I think, and Glesna, good morning. Good morning, Linda and Michelle. I think a lot of it is red tape, rules and regulations, because I did talk to, this particular church. It does have a priest. I never spoke to him. I spoke to the deacon, who's just as nice as and accommodating as could possibly be. Just a very nice man. And I spoke to him quite a bit and explained to him, a lot of the situation. And I love that church in Brentwood, St. Mary Magdalene. And again, they were going to accept Don and hold his funeral mass there, even when they didn't even realize his affiliation with the church. So I am not at all upset with them. They did a beautiful, fantastic job at St. Mary Magdalene. Very accepting, very accommodating. But it's to me, it's more about again, I'm not the structure. And this last pope, I did not like that guy at all. I grew up believing that the pope is the holy grail. That's the person that is the leader of the church. That's the person who is closest to God. And as I've gotten older, I've drifted away from a lot, those thoughts and those beliefs. And the last pope that we had, I really think of him as a bad person. And the new Pope Leo, again, from what I understand, he's from Illinois. Now, his brother, from what I understand, his brother is a big Trump supporter, but Pope Leo himself is not a Trump supporter. Now, it could be that's just some of the hoopla surrounding him. I don't know. But organized religion, I think, is very different than your typical Bible-based church where you go and you read scripture. And I'm not sure. I don't want to offend anyone, who follows the Catholic faith. I am not anti-Catholic by any means. I am Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I will always be Catholic. But at the same time, I believe in the Bible and reading the Bible. I've read it many times, by the way. And I've talked about this many times. I would really like to have a priest, or not a priest. Oh man, I would like to have a minister or a preacher come on the show, and like maybe once a month, and just give like a little blessing to the show. I think that would be a really nice thing to do. And I've searched. It's not for lack of trying. I have asked so many people. You have no idea. And all of the ministers, all of the preachers I spoke to, they just don't want any part of it. And I don't blame them. They don't want to get embroiled in politics or, seem like they're coming on to a podcast or a radio show as it was before. So I get it, but I'm going to eventually find one. I've asked many. I will eventually find one. Robert says Pope Leo is a borderless guy as well. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Robert, look at the Vatican from Google Earth on a 45-degree angle and look at what you see. I haven't looked at that. Linda, our church preaches the Bible. Linda, what is it, a Catholic church, Linda? And Glesna, Shepherd's Chapel, 50 years, doesn't pass a plate, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, translates Bible from Greek, Latin, Chaldean. I don't like the traditions of man in organized churches, right? Glesna, that's exactly how I feel as well. And I'm not trying to go off on a tangent on this, but it is what it is, and it was a little disappointing to me. But I also, though, I have to say that I haven't attended a church service in quite some time, and it was really nice to be in the church. It's like all those memories came back to me that I grew up going to church every single Sunday. My stepdad was in the choir. We participated in the donut day where families take turns getting the donuts and going to the rectory hall and serving donuts and hot chocolate and coffee after church service. And that was something that we did. I didn't go to Catholic school, but I did go to the CCD classes. My stepbrother and sister did go to Catholic school. Linda, Baptist, and my son actually, when he was young, I put him into a Pentecostal school, and I do think that really did rub off on him in a very positive way. And, you know, there's a lot to be said about religion altogether. I would really, and in my area where I'm at now, I need to seek out one of the churches around here because I know there are some good ones. I would really like to get back into going every Sunday, like I did growing up. I didn't realize how much I missed it actually until I went into the church. And I thought, man, why have I stayed away so long? It's kind of interesting. Jay says they have to watch political affiliation because of their tax exempt status. Yes, Jay, I hadn't really thought about that, but that is probably true. And I can't see who my scrolling doesn't always scroll that, and I've used like a MacBook, and the scrolling doesn't work that well. And let's see here. Someone said something about Robert, raised Catholic, my current view is they worship Lucifer, a great disguise and deception, just my opinion. Trying to see if I missed anything. Good morning, Frank. Frank, I do feel a little bit better today. I was feeling a little bit worse this morning. I was kind of going back and forth with, can I get through a show or can I not? Because I woke up and I think I have a fever today. And I'm like, man, I just finished my antibiotics. I guess I'm going to have to start all over again. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, lots to talk about. I just wanted to throw that in there because I guess on my perspective, since Don's been my stepfather since I was 6 years old, I always knew this day was coming, and I wanted to make sure it was as special of a day as you can, because if you're a very faithful person like he was, then you believe that your life here is just a stepping stone. You are here to survive this manly earth, and you're here for a very brief period of time. But when you leave here, you have eternity. So when you're here in this body, then you're going to do the best you can so you can get into, of course, the gates of heaven. And that's what he always believed. And I wanted to make sure we sent him out in the best way possible. Good morning, Lane. Hope you're having a good morning. And Jay, the church isn't the building, it's the people, right? I agree, Jay. I've thought about that before. I have a pretty big property here, and I really thought one time about putting up like a little altar and some benches and inviting a local preacher to come out, on Sundays, and just inviting people that I know to come out for a little bit of a Bible-based service. I really might do that someday. I think that would be something nice to do. And I thought about it, and the more I think about it, the more I think it's a great idea. So if I do that, I will let you guys know. I know it's a long drive for probably all of you, but you guys would all be welcome, of course, to come out if we can get that to work out. I think that would be fantastic. Some of the other things to talk about, to throw out there really quick. If you guys like seeing movies, guess what? AMC 50% off movie tickets. It should be 50. It's too bad it's not 50% off concessions, because I think that would get a lot of people out to the movie theater. But I work in anti-piracy. I spend a lot of time in movie theaters, and all of the movie theaters in this area are fantastic. All of the groups, whether it's AMC or Marcus, which of course used to be Warenberg, which was a popular name here in the St. Louis area. People have got to get back out and seeing movies. It's still a really good time to go. It's, good quality family time. And I realize a lot of people will say, well, there's not really that many movies out. There's always something. There is always something. And I know it's expensive, but there's all of the theaters, particularly here locally, they always have a day where you can go and at a discounted rate. I know that it's Tuesdays at Marcus Theaters. I don't know. I think it's $5 movies, or they might have changed it to $6 movies. I'll have to look at that. And I believe it's like $1.50 for hot dogs, and you get a free popcorn, something along those lines, if you're a loyalty member. Now we have AMC 50% off tickets on Wednesdays, and they have other food and concession stand specials also on Wednesdays. But it is still a good time to go to the theaters. Mike, good morning and blessings back to you, Mike. Jay, Hollywood isn't making good movies. I probably see every, or at least hear every single movie that comes out. And there are some who that aren't as good as the others, but there's always something out there for everyone. Even if you go out, Kingdom makes some really good movies. If you're familiar with the studio called Kingdom, they do all the faith-based films, a lot of the faith-based films. And then we also, of course, have the Angel Network. They do a lot of good faith-based films. And almost at any given time, you're going to find one of these faith-based movies at the movie theater. So don't hesitate to go out and try to look, because there are still some good options out there. Some of these faith-based films, they don't have maybe the budget to advertise as much as, let's say, a Mission Impossible by Paramount. Paramount, obviously, very wealthy studio. So of course you're going to hear about those movies first. But there's always something going on at the theaters. Go through the list, look. Summer's coming up, so at least you can go to AMC for that 50% off. Or maybe I'll see you guys on a Tuesday up at Ronnie's, where I do a lot of my anti-piracy work. Good morning, Bill. Hopefully you're doing well. Hope you guys are all doing well. So we knew that Biden cooked the books, didn't we? We already knew. We talked about it months ago. And of course, everyone wants to tell us, oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. That didn't happen. Biden would never do that. Not Biden in the auto pen. I don't even know if Democrats have accepted that almost every single thing, executive order that was signed by Joe Biden, was actually an auto pen. And now we find out, what were there, 3 auto pens floating around? And no one even talks about it anymore. We talked about the auto pen scandal for a very short time. And like everything else, we're very fickle. We move on to other things, and we have no idea. No one talks about the auto pen any longer. But I would like to see everything that he signed with that auto pen to be completely invalidated. I would love to see that. But now we see that the Labor Department released a report that states that the Biden administration claimed to have created 400,000 jobs 400,000 jobs. That was between the months of July and September of 2024. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. It's not that it was a mistake, a miscalculation. They just lied. The jobs were never created. The Labor Department literally said they were fake jobs. They were not real jobs. So I mean, it's all just lies, isn't it? I feel like everything we heard, everything that took place during the Biden administration, it was just lies. And now we're seeing the truth finally the truth, through the Department of Doge, through some of Trump's executive orders. And it's so amazing to me. And it's so confusing to me how most Democrats just don't get it. They see what Trump is doing and they really don't understand. They don't want to see illegals deported, even when we tell them that these illegals committed very serious crimes. What did they make? A couple hundred arrests the other day. Where was that? I wasn't planning on talking about it, but I did read about it, and they made a couple of hundred arrests, and it was in Texas, I believe, and criminals for sure, murderers, rapists, traffickers, drug dealers, arsonists right here still in the United States. And Democrats will say, why are we deporting these people? And of course, leave it to Trump to turn that around on them, because guess what Trump is doing? He's creating a homeless vet center. Have you heard about this? It's going to be a veteran center. It's going to be state of the art, purposely to serve homeless veterans. It's going to provide housing and meals and healthcare for America's homeless veterans. And guess what he's going to do? He's going to use the funds that were set up to house illegals to house these homeless veterans. I mean, if you're like me, you're thinking, finally, someone cares about our homeless veterans. And there are so many of them out in the street. Beatrice, Florida. Was it Florida? For some reason, I know they just did a big sting in Hawaii and arrested some really bad folks. Good morning, Paula, and good morning, Karen. I think all of us have said for a very long time now, here we roll out the red carpet for people coming into our country illegally, by many different means coming into our country illegally. We have given them billions of dollars worth of shelter. It's kind of crazy to think that people come into this country, they have nowhere to go, right? They have nowhere to live. And we're paying for them to have apartments, for them to rent homes. Our government has given them up to $25,000 in cash to start a business, cash money to start a business. And I know it's true. I've talked to the people. We've talked about it on the show, and it is about time that the tables have been turned. If you guys saw the video in Texas of what used to be the processing center, I need to save that and show that to you guys if you haven't already seen it, where they used to process the folks coming in illegally across the border. It's gone. They dismantled it. They took it down. It's an empty field now. There's nothing there. Because why? Because we're not processing people anymore when they come across the border. A, we're not letting them cross the border. B, when they come across the border, we immediately take them and send them back around and we deport them. These are not the times of Joe Biden, that's for sure, or even Obama. I know Obama did deport, probably at that time more than any other president. Now Trump has since beaten that record, but at one time Obama was, believe it or not, Hillary Clinton one time was really harsh, on people coming over into this country illegally. But then, of course, money started talking, and they take the bait, right? As does everyone in the government. But you're right, Bill. It is about time that we are finally taking care of our veterans, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be simple. It's a facility that needs to be built, but it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And the way I understand it, and I haven't heard all of the details yet, maybe you guys have, is it sounds like it's going to be one large facility and that veterans can come in from all over the country to this facility for treatment, for housing, for medical care, etc. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if there are going to be branches, of course, around the country, but as of right now, I've only heard of the one facility being built. So we'll see how all that plays out, but it's pretty darn exciting. And speaking about refugees and people coming into our country. As you know, we welcome 59 South Africans coming into our country. I got a little video of here, and it's kind of funny when you watch this video. There's a, well, let's see. Bill says, I've heard Trump is remodeling Alcatraz. Let's see here, for a hotel for the criminal immigrants. I've heard that too, Bill. I don't know if that's true, but I know that there are plans to open Alcatraz. I've heard there's already crews there working on some type of project, the same as, and we haven't talked about this in a long time, but same as Guantanamo Bay. They've been working on building these new facilities in Guantanamo Bay for quite some time, and no one knows really what they plan to do there. It looks like, if you see the photos or the videos, it looks like a courthouse, and it looks like another type of administration building. And some people say there's like more holding facilities that they're putting up. But there's a lot of construction that's been going on in Guantanamo Bay really since the time that Trump took office. So, well, I'm very curious what that turns out to be. There are people who speculate that at some point we're going to fast track and we're going to take illegals to the Guantanamo Bay, or maybe terrorists. I'm not sure yet who is going to be going there. I'm going to guess is going to be the worst of the worst. They'll be able to have their trial, I'm thinking, at that courthouse, and immediately be taken into custody, and who knows what from there. So those are some things to that we'll see, kind of play out as time goes on. It was Catherine Hedridge, if I can, is that her name? Hedridge, who was there. And I played a couple of videos of her being there in Guantanamo Bay, where she said, what's happening here? Look at all the construction going on. But it was very hush hush. They didn't let her take much video. So we don't really know. We can only kind of speculate and guess. But I think it'll be pretty fantastic, whatever it might be. So I got a little video clip here of the white South African refugees coming into the country. Now, I don't know how long you guys have been listening to me, on prior shows, but I've been talking about the genocide against white farmers for many, 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 many years. And I'm so happy that finally we are stepping up and doing something to help these people. Think about this. This is pretty uneventful, but I wanted to show it either way. They're just sauntering in, not rushing the gates, not trampling people over. Now, these people, don't you know that they are thankful to be here? We saved their lives. Donald Trump has saved the lives of these 59 people. 59 is just the tiniest drop in the bucket. There have been nearly 7,000 white South African farmers and ranchers that have been murdered. And it's by the government. It's a touchy subject to a lot of people, where they say, well, there is no such thing as white genocide taking place in South Africa. But quite honestly, this has been going on for a really long time. I've shared this story before, where I came into contact with a woman whose husband was murdered. They knew that, of course, they were in jeopardy. If you're a white South African farmer or a rancher, the government wants your land. They want your farm. And that it's just a matter of time before you're the house they roll up to. And this particular woman told me that they had been in fear for quite some time. They'd seen the government forces come to neighbors' houses. They've had neighbors, friends that were murdered, horrifically in many cases. And they knew that at some point they were going to have to flee. There were various, refugee camps set up in the country where they could flee out to the country. And even then, when they were at the refugee camps, they feared that the government would come out and massacre them there. And they did. That's just what's so crazy about it, is that they did. So this woman was asleep, her and her husband. And I think can't recall if they had one child or two, but they were asleep. You sleep with one eye open in this kind of situation. They heard a noise. She got up and saw that, something was going on outside. And it didn't take any time at all before these government forces came in to the home, killed her husband, harmed her. She was injured, didn't hurt the kids, from what I understand. She was able to escape and run through a field, and her and her kids ended up in a refugee camp. And they spent every single night absolutely terrified that the government forces were going to come and find the refugee camp and murder them all. And while she didn't experience that, from what I understand, now this was years ago, I don't know where she is now, or what her family is up to now, or where they've made their way to. But there were refugee camps in which the government did come through and brutally murder, the refugees. Just a terrible situation, absolutely terrible. And it's hard to believe that this is going on in the world we live in today, that these things are taking place across the world. People talk about slavery and how terrible slavery is. Go over to Libya, and guess what? Right now, there are people being sold every day in a market into slavery. It's happening all across the world in various countries. And you know what? We don't do anything about it. So I'm kind of glad we're stepping up to help out these South Africans. I don't know what their place will be here, what they'll be doing. Most of them are farmers. A lot of them are very wealthy, quite honestly, wealthy ranchers and farm owners. But I can't even imagine having your home and your life just stripped away from you. And it's not unique to white South Africans, of course. There were people that this happened to in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria. The people who were good, God-fearing people who lived a good life. And then you have terrorists come in and remove you from your home, and your life's turned upside down. And when it comes to taking in refugees, I think we as America should bring anyone who is suffering into our country as a refugee. However, there's got to be some stipulations to that, because there's also that, chance that we have people posing as refugees, and we know that happens. We know it happens. Not a lot of answers there. Let's see here. Jay says they hate slavery unless it means cheap goods from China. Isn't that the truth, Jay? No one wants to think of the people who work in sweatshops as slaves, but that's exactly what it is. You'll have a group of people working, 18 hours a day in one of these sweatshops, making what, $1? It's insane, absolutely insane. So we'll see. Hopefully, we will bring more of these refugees from South Africa into our country, try to help them out. And again, to me, we even though we have to get rid of the people who are here illegally, entered our country illegally, we still have to be a compassionate country. We still have to bring people in who need help. Some people have no choice. Look what's happening in India. A lot of the Hindu people, it's the same situation, and where we have the Pakistanis, other people, within the country of India coming through and just slaughtering the Hindus. It's just insane, the suffering that goes on around our world. I know a lot of people say, well, the end is coming, and it probably is, because there is just an unsurmountable amount of suffering that's going on. And no one does anything about it. I don't even think most people know or care. Everybody just goes about their lives, which I get. We all got to do what we've got to do. And some other things I wanted to talk about today, of course, outside of that. Well, before I move on to another subject, I wanted to show you guys something that I thought was a little bit comical. And I know you'll recognize our friend here. I know you'll recognize her. Now, I expect another video soon. And now, where did she move? Was it Ireland? Here, I'm going to play this.
Things are getting crazy over there in the US of A. I mean, they've been crazy for months now, right? At least 100 days. If he admits one more time that the election was rigged, I mean, why is he allowed to admit this over and over again and no one does anything about it? It's very obvious that it was. And he keeps saying it because he has like some form of dementia or something that he can't help but tell on himself for what he's done, as he has always, or he puts it on someone else, exactly what he has done. But it's very, very overwhelming, and I can't even begin to talk about the ICE raids and who the hell are these ICE people, and their names are going to come out, and boy, if they could see themselves the way the rest of Americans see them.
Okay, so let's backtrack here. Who are these ICE people? ICE agents? And soon we'll know their names. How will we know their names? Are you going to dox them? And what America thinks about them? I think the majority of Americans, including people who immigrated here illegally, they love what ICE is doing. They love what ICE is doing. Absolutely love it. Glesna, one of the saddest persons. Let's see here. One of the saddest persons. They are all so sad. So, yes, she moved out of the country. I think she moved to Ireland. And what's so funny is that, Ireland right now is just overran with illegals, quite honestly. People who've come into their country illegally, taking over shops, chasing people around. I just watched a video this morning. I'm not going to play it, but it was a video over somewhere in the UK where there were migrants, that had been brought into the country. Now, they were brought into country legally. They live in the streets. There's not enough housing for them to live in. And they were chasing these people through a community with machetes and axes. And I'm like, holy cow, how close are we to that here? And then somebody under the video commented that they live somewhere in Massachusetts. And they're like, we're not far from that here. They said, we live in Massachusetts, but we feel threatened every single day. And I'm like, what is happening in this country? And, we've talked about this on the show before. And of course, I'm going to talk about it with Colonel Joe Adams tomorrow. But we showed that video on the show, I don't know, maybe a month ago. I know I missed some time, so it was probably about a month ago. And it was about that construction project that's going on in Texas. It's Josephine, Texas. It's called Epic. Do you remember that? It's a Muslim community called Epic. It's 402 acres. We talked about it here. Then we had Colonel Joe Adams come on. I don't know if it was a week or two later, and he brought it up also. And we talked about it then that my issue with this, it has nothing to do with Muslim. It has absolutely nothing to do with them. It wouldn't matter to me. It's a 402 acre Muslim community, 402 acre Amish community, 402 acre Christian community. It doesn't make any difference to me. It's not about that. It's about the fact that the church, the mosque, if I can get that out right, the mosque at the center of this epic development, their prior imam had been outed as being someone who had been radicalized. And he spoke out about the radicalization within, or I take that back. They had an imam there who spoke out about the radicalization in that mosque. He wasn't radicalized. He was against radicalization, if I can get it straight. And I talked about this back in 2016. And that's why I'm having a hard time remembering all the details. I talked about this back in 2016 because they hosted Hillary Clinton for a fundraiser. And now that imam back then was fired because he spoke out about the mosque and how many of their members were becoming radicalized. They fired him and hired a new imam who I'm assuming must be as radicalized as some of the members because we've never heard another peep out of them. Now, all of a sudden, they're wanting to build this 402 acre community. And then this is exactly how terrorism spreads. They start out, and again, it's not because it's a mosque, it's not because it's Muslim. It is simply the situation that we know in this country that there are no-go zones. We know there's radicalization that takes place, and it doesn't matter whether it's Antifa creating what did they call it, Chad out in Seattle, or whether it's Muslims or anyone else. If you create a space that's a no-go zone where you are within that space creating your own laws, holding your own court system, whether it be Sharia law or the complete lawlessness from Antifa out in Seattle, either way, we can't have that in this country. So Governor Greg Abbott of Texas stepped up yesterday. He made the announcement that he has halted construction of Epic, the 402 acre complex, and he is going to review it and determine whether or not it's a threat to the state of Texas. And I absolutely applaud him for doing so. Absolutely applaud him because I'll tell you what, we have got to end. We've got to end these no-go zones, whether they're Muslim or Antifa or whoever wants to establish their no-go zone in this country. No, this is America. We're all Americans. There shouldn't be any place in this country where Americans can't go or where we cannot rule under American law. And again, it doesn't matter who it is. It's just not acceptable. And we have to, call it for what it is there is radicalization in this country that is spreading. And I hope to talk about that a little bit more with Colonel Joe Adams when he joins us tomorrow. And let's see here. Charles, good morning, Charles. Rosie still doesn't know she was lied to about Trump. She'll never know because she'll never believe the people who told her. Kimberly, she's pretty interested in the USA happenings for someone who won it out so badly. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, I heard she's not very happy, where she went. So again, I thought it was Ireland. Not sure. Not exactly sure. And so I guess you guys have also heard about I've got a picture of it, by the way, of the Qatar plane. And I'm going to show this to you really quick here. So here's the story. Is this true or is it not true? We are told and made to believe that Donald Trump has accepted this plane from the country of Qatar, that it was a gift from the royal family. Now, some people are saying that Trump accepted the plane and that it will be his new Air Force One, and that when he steps down from his term, it's going to become part of or the presidential library. But there's folks on Trump's team who said no, it's fake news. He absolutely did not accept the plane. So I don't know what the truth is. Did he take the plane? Did he not take the plane? But the backstory is that Qatar, the Qatar royal family, that they donated this plane to Donald Trump. It's a $400 million 747-8 jumbo plane. And I've seen the photos of the inside. I'm not sure if you guys have, but it's absolutely beautiful. I just don't know what the truth is. I just don't know what the truth is. But from what we understand, if we were going to say that yes, Donald Trump should accept this plane, is that it does fly higher. I'm told at a higher altitude. It is safer to transport the president of the United States than the current Air Force One, and that it is also, a much safer plane. And it has that, if you can look at the photo here, it has the upper deck. So they're saying that if Donald Trump were to use this plane in the place of Air Force One, that he would have, and it's also very quiet, that he would have an area there for press, he would have an area there for dignitaries, whoever he's flying with, and then he would have that upper level, which could be his private, residence. They call it the private palace in the sky. But I don't know what the truth is. It's another one where it's hard to know these days what's true, what's not true. But if he did, Laura Loomer spoke out about this, and she said if Donald Trump did in fact accept this plane from the royal family in Qatar, that it's going to be a huge stain on his presidency, because Qatar has supported the Muslim Brotherhood, they've supported terrorism groups in this country, and that she thinks that he absolutely should not accept it. Now, we know that Donald Trump, not too long ago, also released some information that he's going to build a very nice golf course over in Qatar. So maybe there's more, of a relationship there than we know. And if so, could be, of course, Trump's way of strategically convincing Qatar to stop funding these proxy groups, stop funding terrorism groups that are terrorists right here in our own country. So it'll be another one that's interesting to see whether or not it's true or not. But for anyone who knows or doesn't know, Air Force One has been in pretty bad shape for a long time. They were wanting to commission a new Air Force One several years ago, and it just hasn't taken place. And there's a lot of people who believe that it's not safe. The current Air Force One is not safe to fly, particularly a president of the United States. So I don't know how I feel about this. I hate to see Donald Trump accept a plane from a country that supports terrorism, but I don't know. Is it a gift? Is it a gift to the country? Is it a gift to Donald Trump? Of course, Donald Trump as president isn't allowed to accept gifts, but if it's a gift to the country, maybe. I don't know. I'd be very curious what you guys think about that, because I just do not know. So I know we're almost out of time. I wanted to throw a couple other things in there. The IRS getting ready to lay off allegedly 45,000 employees. Too bad they didn't do that before tax time, but better late than never. Of course, Trump putting them on a 90-day pause. Either way, to me, it's so crazy. Remember the Obama administration weaponized the IRS against Americans? And of course, they're accusing Trump of doing the same thing, which we know is absolutely not true. We know for a fact that Obama weaponized the IRS against Americans. And then we have the situation, remember, under Biden, where we have the IRS, wanting to, you put $600 in your account. Well, they want to know where it came from. So as an American, you can't earn $600 without being questioned by the IRS. And I know we've all been there where we go to the bank and your bank says, "Why are you depositing this cash?" I remember going to deposit cash and the bank saying, "Oh," because I would actually cash a check. I have bank accounts at different banks. I would cash a check at one bank and then take cash and, deposit it into a different bank. And it seems like the long way about doing things, but it was easier for me. And they say, "Well, we have to see your ID." And I'm like, "Well, you have to see my ID to deposit cash?" Yes, because we have to make note of it. Just in case anything funny is going on, it's just the law. That's what we're required to do. And you know what? I stopped going to that bank and I started going to a smaller credit union. And never once has that credit union ever asked me for an ID or questioned literally why. Why are you depositing this money? Where did this money come from? It is nobody's business, is it? This is America. It's not your business, Mr. Bank, where I have obtained this money. If I'm committing crimes, guess what? That's up to the police. They can do an investigation. My bank has no business asking me about my money. My bank has no business going through my transactions to see if I'm purchasing weapons or ammunition. It is none of their business. My bank doesn't have the right to look to see if I flew to Washington, D.C., right around January 6th. That's not their business. But guess what? That's exactly what they were doing. Those bigger banks like US Bank, Bank of America, oh no, I won't have anything to do with those big banks. And oh, Bill, you also have a good day. And Charles, I heard that it's a part of a promise to spend more money in the US, something like $1 trillion over time. Saudis are proposing a similar deal. Yeah, and Trump put out that, remember that $5 million gold card? And he's had a lot of takers on that $5 million gold card. And I know for a fact, just like you stated, Charles, that Saudi Arabia, now they are already a very big, very indebted here with our infrastructure, which I really don't like, quite honestly. It's a double-edged sword, right? We want people to come into our country and spend money. We want them to help us build infrastructure, but at the same time, I want things to be American owned, not Saudi owned, not Qatari owned. I want them to be American owned, and that's stuff like the Four Seasons Hotel. I love the Four Seasons Hotel. It's Saudi owned. Most of the gas stations you go to, guess what? They're not owned by Americans, and that's okay too. America is a country for everyone to prosper. I don't have a problem with that. But I remember back several years ago, right after 9/11 took place, where we talked about how all of these different gas stations, even some here in the St. Louis area, are owned by some of the same countries that support terrorism. And I know you guys were probably thinking I was talking about India, but I'm not. I'm talking about countries that support terrorism that own gas stations here in the United States. And that's what's so funny about it. Liberals are, they support the LGBTQ community, but yet they go and get gasoline and support these businesses in which, if you are a gay person living in one of these countries, they will burn you alive. But we don't hear the liberals hating them or speaking out about them. They only hate us. And most of us support the gay community, but they hate us, don't they? But they support the people who actually kill the gay folks. It never makes sense, does it? The whole world's just all upside down and mixed up. Upside down and mixed up. And let's see here. Mandy, same with taking a large amount out. Yes, you're right, Mandy. It's my money, no explanation needed. And Mandy, that's a really good point, because I have gone to the bank before and tried to take out large sums of money. And the bank says, "Oh, well, you have to order it. We don't have money here. Call us a day before, 2 or 3 days before. We have to order it from the Federal Reserve." I'm like, "What?" Which I get. Your bank, the banking system's pretty screwed up, quite honestly. Your money is just a blip on a screen. Your bank doesn't have a big vault with all your money in it. And there's actually people who think they do. There's no vault with a bunch of money in it at most banks. They have very little cash. And if you want to take out cash money, you have to call ahead of time at a lot of banks so they can make sure they have the cash there. And then, of course, yes, they want to know, why are you taking it out? What are you going to do with this money? None of your business. None of your business. In America, it's none of your business. And if you want to call the police on me and have the police investigate me, then go right ahead. But it is not the bank's responsibility to investigate and to question us about what we are spending our money on. I don't care about checks and balances. I just don't. And Jay says, wanted to know where our $600 came from, but Hunter hadn't paid millions in taxes and multiple, I don't know what you mean, to hide funds from foreign sources. Yes, of course. Oh, LLCs, sorry. And Jay says, jobs lead to prosperity. And yeah, it's crazy. Our world is just a big, messed up, upside down mess after Joe Biden and Obama, after those terms. Well, we may never recover from it. May never recover. Something else, a couple things. I know I'm going to be out of time, so I'm probably going to run over a few minutes. Good morning, Trishian. And I get really angry when it comes to the banks because I'm one of those kind of people. Don't come to my house and try to rob me. I do not have a cache of money under my bed or in any safe or anything like that. But I would be one of those people who does not trust banks. I remember my son's dad back in the day, of course he's passed away, so you can't rob him either, but he would keep, a lot of money at his house and, in an undisclosed location because he did not trust the banks. And he's an attorney. He knew better. He did not trust the banks. I don't trust the banks either. I always, but I'm trying to build a life for myself where money doesn't matter. Does that kind of make sense? I think we should all be trying to build a life for ourselves that money just doesn't matter. Where if you have a shelter, you can grow your own food, you can process your own meat. There's a lot of ways where you can live without money, believe it or not. And you might say, well, you have to have money for healthcare or to pay your utilities and all these things. But I'll tell you what, if something crazy happens in this country, you need to learn how to live without electricity, without a vehicle, without gasoline, without the internet. So we've all got a long way to go to get there. But to me, if something happened and the banks closed up, I would be very upset, but I wouldn't see it as the end of the world. So we've got to move away from thinking that everything's tied up with money because guess what? It's not. People survived for many, many years bartering and trading and didn't worry about monetary things like we do these days. So something to think about there. And so a couple more things I want to talk about before we go. Keep an eye on your kids. I don't know if you guys have seen these reports. It's a group called 764. Have you heard about this? I have never heard about this. I've been reading the reports and doing some kind of, research on my own. And what this is it's a group of people. Some of them are here in the United States, some of them are overseas, and they're targeting your children. Most kids these days, a lot of kids play video games. A lot of kids are online, they're in social media. Well, what's happening is this is a specific group that their only goal is to cause chaos. They're not trying to steal money from you. They're not trying to gain anything. They just want to harm you. They want our country here in the United States to be destabilized. I feel like there's so many different bad actors trying to destabilize us, not only personally as families, but also just across the country in general. And this group 764 is no different. So what they're doing is they're targeting these kids again through gaming apps, through social media, and they're asking kids to, let's say, send in naked photos of themselves. They pretend to be, let's say, a young boy and asking this girl for photos, or the opposite way around. And, that's one way they get to them. Or they get really close to them. They find out secrets. They pretend to be other people. Well, then what they do is they turn around, they try to convince these kids to commit, or let me rephrase this carefully so I don't get taken down, to unalive themselves. And they've been successful in some of these attempts. And they call in threats to schools. They have they use this material to the information they gain from these kids. They use it against the kids. And there was a case just recently where they somehow obtained some photos of a young girl and convinced her that she needed to call her school and call in a BOMB threat. And of course, which caused chaos. That's our goal, is to cause chaos. And it's not safe. It's very harmful, not only to these kids, but to the family in general. They're responsible for a lot of the swatting incidents. And I have never even heard of this group 764, never even heard of them up until recently. And again, their only goal is to cause stability and chaos in your home, in your family, and in your community. So please keep an eye on what your kids are doing. Keep an eye on who they're talking to. You probably already do, but there are threats out there that we didn't even know anything about. At least I didn't know anything about them, but I am learning very quickly. And the two more things I wanted to jump on real quick before it is time to head out. Have you heard about Operation Sandman? And if you are, you're probably like, what exactly is Operation Sandman? This is something we're going to be talking about more in the coming days and coming weeks. Operation Sandman is believed to be a kind of an under the radar operation where there's 100 different nations that have come together. They're not advertising it, they're not talking about it publicly, but these nations have come together to destabilize the United States under Donald Trump. Their goal is to all at once sell treasury bonds. And this is happening allegedly today, tomorrow, and into the next couple of weeks. And the goal is to destabilize the American dollar. And I think you guys all know our American dollar is hanging there pretty precariously right now, and it wouldn't take much to destabilize it, and that is their goal. Now, is it happening? Is it not happening? There's so many things these days we hear, and we just don't know. But that is what the back channels are all saying, that Operation Sandstorm is underway. These 100 countries attempting to destabilize the dollar, all because they want to destabilize Donald Trump and all of his supporters. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is an actual plan, if it is underway, because we know it wouldn't be difficult to do. We're in such a fragile spot as it is. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard about that. I don't have much time to get into it, but we'll be talking about that a little bit more as we go on. Before we go, I wanted to play this very quick clip of Dr. Ardis talking to Real America's Voice about sugar. Because as you guys know, I have really been worried about health issues, and I went down that road where my doctor thought that I had some type of malignancy, sent me to a cancer specialist, got some biopsies done. Thank God it was a bacterial infection, even though that's a pretty bad situation. It's still not nearly and doesn't even compare to a malignancy. And I talked about sugar heading into some of the scans I had to do. I had to get a PET scan. And when you get a PET scan, if you guys were listening to any of those shows, what happens is you go on like a carnivore type diet for a couple of days before the PET scan. No sugar at all. You can have meat, eggs, cheese, and water or something along those lines, and that's it. And the reason why is because they don't want any sugar in your body. Because when you go to get your PET scan, they're going to inject you with a glucose substance, which is what carries the radio tracer material to, let's say, a malignancy or an inflammation or an infection. And I talked to a little bit about the radiologist there that day, and I didn't get too far into it with him, but I just kind of asked how it worked. And he said, well, glucose goes straight to a tumor, straight to an infection, straight to a site of inflammation. And so I started researching it. And what I found when I was researching it is that, of course, and most of us know this anyway, it's kind of common sense, but you eat sugar, of course, and your sugar goes straight to the most damaged areas of your body. If you have a cancerous tumor, guess where the sugar is going to go? If you have inflammation, guess where the sugar goes? I always thought that sugar caused inflammation. Now I'm starting to believe that the sugar just finds the inflammation and causes it to be so much worse. So when you go and get a PET scan, the glucose, goes straight to those tumor areas or those other places, brings the radio tracer there. That's what shows us up as a hotspot on the PET scan. And that is how the radiologist obviously can see where these damaged areas of your body are. I had a couple of different, I think I had a hot spot on my thyroid and a hot spot where was it? On one of my lymph nodes. And so of course, when I went in, it was just like an abscess, an infection. And my thyroid, they don't really know, nothing, I guess, to be concerned with. But it really made me wonder. And I've been thinking about sugar, studying sugar. And I don't think I have to tell you guys that it's a poison, but I want you guys to hear what Dr. Ardis had to say about this. Now, I would love to have Dr. Ardis on the show, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So in the meantime, we'll just have to
So
do
why is
sugar
so critical in the healing process as well? I know, but I want to hear your expert.
Okay, I've been doing interviews, thousands of them over the last 5 years. This is the first time anyone's asked me that. I'm so excited. Okay, did you know that sugar, when you eat it, a donut, Pop-Tart, piece of bread, doesn't matter, Kool-Aid, Dr. Pepper, did you know that when you swallow sugar, They have known for 70 years that it goes inside your bone marrow and it suppresses within 45 minutes your body's ability to produce white blood cells that fight infections like bacteria, yeast, viruses, funguses, and parasites. Did you know that it literally shuts off your immune system and makes you more susceptible to all viruses, all infections? And did you know that they compared sugar to prednisone? Prednisone is a steroid. And do you know that its job is to suppress your immune system? In fact, it's called an immune system suppressant. Did you know that sugar suppresses your immune system more than prednisone does? So if you're trying to fight an infection, if you're worried about the bird flu in the future, and I find out you're eating donuts and Pop-Tarts and cereal in the morning, you don't care about your health. In fact, when I would walk around grocery stores during COVID, people would see me without a mask and they would start backing up from me. And these people were always overweight, wearing a mask, but they were afraid of me. And then I'd go like this, wait, are you really worried about getting COVID? And they'd go, yes. And I'd go, wait, am I scaring you because I'm not wearing a mask? Yes. Why are you scared? You're wearing your mask. I thought it protected you from people like me. And then I'd go like this. If you're going to tell me to put on my mask, which lots of people would, this is what I'd say to them. I will put on my mask when I see you go put up the Dr. Pepper that's in your basket, when you put up your Gatorade in the basket, your Pop-Tarts, your donuts, your cereals, when you go put that back on the shelves, those things in your basket make you more susceptible to all infections and diseases. Why?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? I wanted to play that clip. It's a longer clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it really does make you wonder, doesn't it? When you eat sugar, and I think most people eat sugar. It's hard not to, quite honestly. It's hidden in your food. It is poison. I think it's one of the ways our food manufacturers poison us, because they put sugar in everything, and we get accustomed to foods that we only want to eat them if they're sweet or if there's sugar in there. There's so many hidden sugars in food, and it really does make me wonder. I look around me and, dealing with my own health issues and, with that lung situation, and seeing some of the other people and what they've dealt with. And, you really do have to wonder what's taking place in our bodies and how the food manufacturers are poisoning us. And foods these days, it's more like a lab, isn't it? It's not like you're getting your food off of the farm. Even if you're, let's say, going to open up a can of vegetables, well, look what those vegetables have been through. It's not like the canning process that you do at home. Look on the back of a label of some of the things you're eating, and not to mention the GMOs and the modifying that they do of our food these days. And so we'll talk about that more later. I know I've ran over time and I have to get to work, but thank you all so much for joining me this morning. And I'm still a little off kilter. I'm sure you guys, if you know me well, can probably tell. I'm still not feeling quite 100%. And I'll explain another day, but it's still not quite right. But hopefully soon. But I do thank you guys for joining me. And hopefully we'll have our favorite person, Colonel Joe Adams, joining us tomorrow morning. Can't wait to talk to him. Lots to talk about. It's been a while since we've had him on. So thank you again for joining me. I'm Tabitha with Tabs on Tap. I hope you guys have a really good day, and I will see you all tomorrow.